Welcome, dear listeners. I'm so glad you're here. Today, I have the honor of introducing an amazing guest, Murat Wahab. He's the founder and principal of Hakim Saya, your global funding partner. He has had over 20 years of experience in banking, entrepreneurship, small business startup advisory. He provides access to capital to domestic and international companies. So he has so much wealth of information when it comes to mastering the art of financial communication. And I think this is such an important topic. I'd love to just dive right in and just say, hi, Maura, thank you for being here.
Oh, hi, Melinda. I just want to, first, before we get started, I just wanted to say thank you so much for inviting me. It is an honor and privilege to be here and be part of your journey and for your own podcast to speak about the topics that dear to my heart. Which is that about related to banking and finance and also related to communication. So the themes for today that I was thinking when you asked me about what are the themes that I want to talk about is mastering the art of financial communication and navigating financing language, cross-cultural nuances, and the power of storytelling, which is quite mouthful, but I think your audience will be appreciative, can learn one or two, hopefully, and by the end when we finish this conversation.
I agree. I know that they're going to love this. I'm going to learn. I can't wait to dive in. So tell me, why is it important? Why is this important that we learn how to do this?
Let me just let you know, I've been in banking for over, wow, officially 14 years. And then prior to that, I was in the hospitality industry for over 13 years here in abroad, and then also working in a nonprofit organization, things like that. And with the capacity as a founder and principal of Hakim Saya, which is your global funding partner, these particular themes are very important and relevant, especially when entrepreneurs or individual, working in an international setting. So the theme itself encapsulates the importance of understanding and effectively using financial jargon. Like many industry have their own acronyms,
Right.
Financial in banking industry as well have a lot of those. So acknowledging the challenges and opportunities in doing business cross-cultural settings and emphasize the compelling role of storytelling in financial pitching, it's a very important because it is a very comprehensive approach that will highlight for me is that the significance of communication skills in the world of the business finance, especially in the context of international dealings, and also how you persuade investors or lenders when you're trying to pitch. So in today's, I plan to clarify to cover a few key points or pointers that maybe will help your audience and or the listeners who listen to your podcast in three things, which is one, the necessity of understanding and using financial language effectively. Two, the impact of cross-cultural nuances in international finance. Number three is the role of storytelling in making financial pitches very engaging and compelling. That's the three things that I want to talk about. Why the topics, these art are very important.
Okay, and what is it? So what is the nuance? What is the importance? Start off with there, the first one.
Absolutely. That's a great question, Melinda. So the nuances is basically like, for example, I have a client that, as a founder and principal of Hakim Saya, helping my client. My client come from around the world. One particular client basically based in Africa. So Africa, just like around the world, people speak English, but their English is not really necessary that you can understand.
Right.
Even though that, they meant something that you think that you understand, but but if you listen carefully, that's not what it meant. So this communications style that, for each different countries or clients that I work with, particularly in Africa, because this is one example that I'm giving, So basically that will, it's critical when a borrower, for example, or the project owners that I dealt with, that the style of communications, it needs to at least, be understood by both parties. Right? This is the challenge because just because you can speak English doesn't mean that culturally that you can understand the nuances. And sometimes a lot of those borrowers or individual when they do business internationally, it's just like they don't understand the American way and vice versa also that they don't understand the other culture like Japanese, the Chinese, like and let alone my clients in Africa. So these are the challenge, and I'm going to go be very specific. One
Okay.
example, when I actually working with my in African client is that they communicate this way, like they say that okay, I'm going to apply for X millions of dollars of loans through to these lenders, and then they said and X Y on what year? They said okay, on the year one I'm going to be profitable. So, these are financial literacy. Like, okay, does it make sense on the year one? And then when you have documentation that you provided, like business plan that you provided to the lenders, it shows differently because those factual information is not corroborated with what you said and what you prove because we base on facts and figures. So the communication needs to be like embedded and it has to be clear when you communicate that with the lender so can they understand that. So I found that by truly get to the point and shows that figures and make sure that what you provide, if factual and figures, is actually resonant to what the documents you're providing, not just saying it.
So when you're working with your client, how are you able to decipher and discern what is clear or what is not? So the person said profitable. I mean, have you done it for so long that you start to make sure that you clarify?
Yeah, so this is the beauty of it because I've been in banking and trained in the commercial training, right? Commercial credit trained, and then I have done so many different,
Yeah.
transactions and different assets class. So it's come to second to it's in nature, right? For me, I don't expect other people who doesn't have those background be able to dissect or decipher immediately. So for me, it is that very easy that immediately that if somebody just say that without even saying, without even actually seeing those spreadsheets and whatnot, immediately I can just gauge and say, this is a go, is this a no-go? Because those is based on experience and it's hard to actually say, and of course that behind the scenes that when I have the data, I have to do all the financial spreads and understanding those data and then communicate that to the borrowers and what does that mean?
Right. So it's always good to definitely when there's something you're not sure of to repeat it, to say it in your own words, to make sure the other party agrees that yes, we are indeed talking about the same thing.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes, and it also very helpful. Basically, another way the challenge is also about using email. So email is another thing, which is that it can be a lifesaver, but it also can be a big hindrance for a lot of the borrowers. Email has a purpose, So when this purpose that it is to communicate that clearly. However, not everybody is a good underwriter. Not also they are not professional writers to make sure that the message get across. And typically, email I perceive is no soul. There's no soul. You cannot see the body language like we're speaking right now and communicating. So if you don't understand, you can let's say, what do you mean? Let me just ask that. And let me pause. Can you expand a little bit? Things like that. In email is not. Often working with my clients, and this is miscommunication, and the lender misunderstood one thing, the borrower misunderstood another thing. And so this is because that the level of knowledge and the level of experience is depending on those borrowers that I work with. Because that doesn't mean they're successful businessmen, they know finance. That
Mm-hmm.
doesn't mean that, right? So they're good what they do. And similarly, and I say that an example of email that my clients basically, my tip is that when you send email, because sometimes the language that you see the word you say, sometimes you're so used to it, let's say the word adapt. What does it mean, adapt? So sometimes the lender will say, adapt? What are you talking about? Right? And so this is the things that I would highly recommend is that pick up the call or arrange a Zoom call,
Mm-hmm.
and speak to
Mm-hmm.
me or to the lender directly.
Mm-hmm.
To iron out like the misunderstanding because it's so easy, especially when you're doing international international setting. It's very easy. This thing happen.
Right. So do you recommend when you're doing, because we're going global. I mean, everybody is working across the different nations, countries. And so do you recommend when you are working across different cultures to just pick up the phone? Like, how do you know when to email or pick up the phone?
So of course there is step-by-step process.
Right.
So you have to go through those step-by-step process. There is also that in the initial conversations or initials, that you're trying to get to know each other. It's like a dating, right? So you kind of like start with you don't ask for marriage proposal just immediately
You
on
don't
the
ask
first
for money.
day.
You're not going to give me money right away.
We're not gonna give you money. No lender's gonna give money like immediately like that. Right? So you have to date in
Yeah.
several steps to go through.
Yeah.
Similarly, in financings that you have to submit your preliminary documents, for example, the executive summary, business plans, your 5 to 10 years financial projections, your management resumes, or your sponsor's background, and construction budget if there is construction per se like that. And then when you start communicating that, and then allow those lenders, like for myself, allow me to do the analysis, understands those information first, right? And sometimes what happened, it was like borrowers are so enthusiastic. They just like bombarded with so much information. And, it's hard when you trying to digest and dissect, business plan, like 100 pages, for example, to read through, let alone the financial that they provided in the spreadsheet. It takes time,
Mhm.
right? Just to understand that. So I think it's very helpful when even communicating, if they can speak the language of the finance, like we're looking at when it talk about like language, we talk about like, okay, financial ratios, what the financial ratio, what their service, that service coverage look like. What's the company, ability to service the debt that they're asking? What is the EBITDA? I'm not sure, but EBITDA like earning before interest, tax, depreciations, amortization. What's the free cash flow? All of these things that is all acronym that they use. So for those that are in finance and banking, maybe sounds simple, but a lot of the people just scratch their head like, what are you asking me? So this is important when they should have someone's like the CFO that they work with that understands and then be part of this. Sometimes the CEO or the owner, they think that they know it all because they know the business, but
Right.
they forget that they are not the masters of everything.
Right, right. And takes time. It takes more time to slow down, to understand everybody's language, to have a good communication, to understand the language of both parties, like what culture are you dealing with? Like make sure if you are pitching that you
Mhm.
learn the language as much as you can if you're pitching. And then
Right.
on the opposite side, if you are maybe a client or maybe you are the person with a lot of technical, you're the financier, you have all the jargon, how do you speak the same language so your client understands?
Right. I'll give you another example. So my
Yeah,
friend, which is in
yeah,
Lima, Peru, right? So
yeah,
Latin America, this is in Peru, is a different. They speak, highly educated individuals, from Oxford and Cambridge, this is a smart people. But when actually speaking and writings are different thing, and you know that. Sometimes people like they speak fluently, but writing is awful, and vice versa. Some people like
right.
actually writing is just fantastic, flawlessly. However, when speaking, it was just like not there.
Yeah.
So this is that very common that I've seen. So in this example of working like in Latin America, smart people they can speak fluent English. So whenever that they put it in writing. For example, my client said, "Oh, we have this type of collateral, X amount of collateral, and this unmovable collateral, like assets, like land or buildings, whatnot." And then what he meant by, this asset that he took it for granted in understanding that the lender probably will understood what he said.
Uh-huh.
So assuming is not good, because the lender then come back and say, "What are you talking about? You don't
Right.
understand what we asked you for, right?
Right.
Why
Right.
are you saying this?" And so this is what I say. It's just like then I have to intervene, and then just to get the lender and write it like, "Listen, Mr. Lender, this is not what my client actually shared that with you, and understand. What he's trying to tell you is this: he has those collateral, he can pledge the collateral, right? If you were to ask, and then this collateral that he asked that he can pledge to secure the funding is
Mhm.
basically free and clear. Some the words they don't use like free and clear. Sometimes they use the word encumbrances, and sometimes they use the word, like it's very the language in itself. It's like not that it's kind of get in the way sometimes. And so, what
Oh,
do you mean?
totally, totally. I mean, basically, okay, jargon is one thing. Jargon is completely almost encrypted, and slang is
Yes,
almost encrypted. Those are
correct.
obvious. And then there's like what you're saying to me, just basic words,
Right.
adapt, profitability, even profitability could be kind of hard too. But
Yeah.
even adapt or
Yeah.
accommodate, like even those the words that or you feel like could be very clear, is not.
It's not. It is like, it's so funny sometimes that when you hear this, because but it's not funny in a way that it's lost in translation. And it does. It
Yeah.
does lost in translation. And sometimes that my client I advise them, if you were to write in English, maybe if you are fluent in Spanish, kind of like have both.
Yeah.
Just kind of like to knowing the fact that the other side of the world actually speak other languages, maybe French or Spanish. But Spanish, for example, like inside the second language that in Latin America that mostly beside Portuguese. So I would say, yeah, then will be very helpful to have that your two languages, just
Right.
avoid from misunderstanding because they're more comfortable on their own language.
Right. 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 Right.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I'm learning Mandarin right now. I better
Yeah.
now after this, I'm gonna get on my Mandarin classes even more.
Yeah. When I used to work in Vietnam before, when I was in the hospitality, that I did, I studied Italian, well,
Okay.
when I
Oh,
was in Vietnam. And
yeah.
then when I studied in Vietnamese language is so like very, very difficult and challenging. And one example is the word like, because there are different tone. When you learn Mandarin, there's a different tone. So
Yeah.
for example, the word chicken, like in Vietnamese like ga, they was like, no, you don't pronounce God, it's a God, like almost like longer.
Yeah. Yeah. Mm.
So I've always butchered them and I messed up, right?
Yeah.
So this is like example, like that's what I say, like, you think that
Right.
you know, but actually you don't know because of there is a difference meaning for that.
Oh yeah, just like a simple tone. Just like if you just go up a little bit too high, changes
Yes.
the entire meaning of that
Yes.
word.
Yeah. And then also the financial jargon in banking is I see like these AML, the ATA, the OCC, FRB, it's almost like, what is that?
Yeah.
So, like for example, we say, hey, you need to actually pass the FACTA at the FCRA. I'm like, well,
What?
what kind of alien is that? You know,
Exactly. English is already hard enough. I mean, the
then
regular spoken word. So
yeah, even like
all
when
of
you
this,
study, yeah, when you
yeah.
study biotech, basically, it's just like a
Even
lot of Latin word.
yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So
For all the people that are out there that are in technology or in your own industry with very specific niche language, just remember that English is already hard enough. So when you're talking to a client or a key stakeholder or you're someone else that you need to either pitch or make an offer, just remember that some of those languages, it's very difficult for other people. And so just consider your audience. Always consider your audience.
correct.
Perhaps their style of communication is important. What is their personality type? Do they like a lot of details or do they like just very bulleted to the point?
Right. Yeah.
Another culture, like you mentioned, culture is important, especially if you're doing international work, right? What is their culture? Because now you're layering on another aspect that you really need to consider. One word, what you think might mean completely something different in another culture, right? Or one
Right. Right.
behavior. Yeah,
Exactly. It's very different world. And then I agree that with you that know your audience who you speak
yeah,
to and not
right.
don't assume things that just because that everybody speak English, when they understand English, no, their understanding is a little bit more different than you.
Exactly.
Never insult their intelligence,
Right,
obviously.
right.
But understanding those culture, the nuances are very important as well. Now, another things like in the language that in finance, even as the basic stuff, when lenders actually trying to consider, regardless of my lenders or banks or non-banks, they're looking at like, they're trying to assess, right? There is five, I don't know whether you heard about five C's in basically in the lending, in the banking. So the five C's are basically that the capacity, the capital, the collateral, the conditions, and character.
Okay.
So this is what, at least the basic stuff when any lender is trying to gauge of how they want to extend credit to, beside well, all other, of course, criteria that have to be met.
Mhm.
But let's take a look about these five C. I will
Mhm.
take the last one, the character. Character is meaning is that very important. So I give you an example of my clients that I've known them for a very long time from my days at Wells Fargo, JP Morgan, and then even when I'm entrepreneurs right now, and then they came back to me. I know when they came back to me, I said, okay, I got my work cut out for this one. So because I know them very well. So
Uh-huh.
they came back and I understand what challenges that I'm gonna face because I know these owners very well, right? And so why they approach me and then ask for help. So in particularly in this scenario is this my clients are trying to refinance a commercial real estate in San Francisco. What had happened is that we talk about character. And so unfortunately that things that happened long time ago. So in the banking and finance world, when your client tells you something that they did, we are obligated to actually to communicate that to the management so we have to do our legal due diligence to make sure that these are still whether or not that it still rings true, and we
Mhm.
have to find the facts finding and to make sure that we mitigate those, right? Whether it mitigate the risk, but in this case a character big issue.
Mhm.
So my client, basically that, they got basically kicked out from another bank, and then they don't, but this bank, existing bank doesn't want to refinance them. So I have to help them to find a new one. So long story short, what I did is actually, I knew that a bank, that community bank in the Bay Area, that basically that when I approached them, this is what the communications is all about. I understand the background and what's the challenges is and how to mitigate that risk. Immediately when I approach this bank, I say that, look, you're not gonna have any issue with the 5C, the earlier on with the capital, the
Mhm.
collateral, the capacities, the condition, but you're gonna have a problem with the characters here. So
Mhm.
if you're gonna get comfortable and then go through these, the credit committee, sometimes they do have that, and in the bank credit committee, and if they can get comfortable and behind these transactions and the reasons why, the reason behind it that this has happened, and I say that then only if they get comfortable, then I would say this is a good deal. Because the rest, the financial ratio, if you're talking about DTI, if you're talking about EBITDA, you're talking about free cash flow, you're talking about net profit, that is non-issue. The
Mhm.
character is the issue. You see? So
Wow.
yeah, so this is important, right? I mean, like, you don't have anything else, but that one thing is still a big thing, turns
Right.
out to be. So long
Right.
story short, what happened is that they, by communicating that and understanding what the roots of the problems and how I communicate that, make sure that the lender themselves understanding and they can get behind it, be comfortable, then they can help the client. And the client also have to be, of course, they have to be honest and transparent based on factual, right? Factual data. That is like cut both ways. And
Right.
so we managed like to get them a new home to a different bank,
Oh,
and they managed
nice.
to finance that because, but it's a lot of work, of course, like anything else, everything is a lot of work behind it, behind the scene. But just to get that in the communicating and understand like every party will on the same voice and have to do their part to make sure that everybody communicated, right? And understanding the roots of the causes of the problem and find the solution, the viable solution that everybody can be comfortable, especially on the lender.
I think that's so cool. I think that's so amazing how important and critical communication can be, especially in these really difficult situations and financial complex challenges.
Mhm.
You really have to be really good communicator.
Absolutely. Another
Yeah.
anecdote that I can give you, like, I have
Yeah.
a former colleagues at the bank, so smart, credit trained, commercially credit trained, smart guy. So what I realized is that the challenges that he faced as being a banker, banker also like any business, you got to sell, right? You got to sell, so like the product and services of your employer of the bank.
Mhm.
So he was not able actually to close deals. And when I say to close deals, like when you talk to communicate with the borrowers or potential borrowers, I would say it's always ended up like, why are these borrowers are not agreeing or wanted to go with them? For
Mhm.
example,
Mhm.
um, there are no doubt there are various reasons, personality, whatnot. But one thing that I do realize, and it applies to like everyone's in sales, it's basically that when you go back to Melinda, when you say that, that the communication style,
Mhm.
whether you are a big picture person,
Right,
whether
right.
you are very specific. So what
Mhm.
happened in this situation is that my former colleagues is that he's a very detail oriented. It's
Mhm.
not to say that's not important. It is important, but
Yeah,
he's seeing the big picture here because
yeah,
at the end, the borrower who are not savvy in terms of understanding what the financial, what the process, what does that mean when
yeah,
you
yeah,
talk
yeah.
to me, all these jargon that you tell
Yeah.
me that you have to meet this number, you have to be financial ratio, you have to be debt service coverage, you have to,
Oh
he
my gosh.
he is good with his business. So
Right.
at the end, those borrowers, only one thing that he said that he want.
Yeah.
Can you do the deal or not?
Right. Exactly.
So that's all came out of from his mouth.
Oh my
You
gosh.
see what I mean? So
Yes.
so basically, my advice is that you take that because of response from the borrower, because you cannot put like on you as a banker, even no matter how knowledgeable are you, and no matter how much are you trying to help, but you got to understand your audience. And this particular borrower, he is
Exactly.
smart, but financing is not for everyone.
Right.
He got his running his business. That's why he's
Right.
successful.
Right.
So, but
Right.
it's just that doesn't mean that he knows the banking and then all the things that you do day in and day out as a banker. No, it's
Right.
not. So that,
Neither does the client or whoever you're trying to close a deal with need to know all those details.
yes, and
It
you are,
becomes too overwhelming.
it's
And
overwhelming.
it's
And
overwhelming.
when you start breaking down into the nuances of what entails,
Yeah.
it doesn't have to be that way. And people would
Right.
yawn after that.
Yeah, I think there's a timing for it. There's a time and place for it, right? And
Correct.
this message is really, really important for everyone, because of the audience here. There's some corporate people and they're very technical, they're engineers, they might be,
Yes.
and so that it's really difficult sometimes because you're so smart and you want to give so much information. And if you feel like the more information you give, the more smart you look, or the more you know, and the more you impress the person, right? And then the other
Yes.
person on the other side, meanwhile, the other person on the other side is actually not, you're not even connecting, you're not clicking.
No,
So,
and I completely agree with you,
yeah,
Melinda. It's
yeah,
basically that, don't try too hard. And just because, like, for example, and I came across this as well when you mentioned about engineers, all right?
yeah,
Engineers, they're precise. So that's why they wanted to be very precise
yes,
of answers that they want.
right,
But what they didn't realize that they are not accounting person, they
right,
are not the finance in the banking.
right,
So they sometimes, what I have seen it is that this can potentially kill the deal themselves
right, right,
single-handed, because
right,
what you say and it's kind of like changed the minds of the lenders. So
right,
basically, when you have that, and
right,
so there's nothing wrong that you want to as much as details that you want, but also that there is a place and time for that. Uh,
right. I agree. I
everything.
agree.
So the
I
tips
agree.
is like, I would say to the audience, like trying to avoid using financial jargons or very complex financial terms when speaking to a diverse audience,
Mhm.
because you never know, because not everyone is like, they're banking professionals and finance, because a lot of them are non-finance professional people, right? So just trying to avoid that and speaking the very plain English or plain language that everybody can understand.
And even that remind you just to be aware, don't assume that even the plain English, sometimes that plain English may not be what you want them to think. So
Correct.
just
Absolutely.
ask
Yeah.
questions. Can you paraphrase? Do you understand? And have the other person repeat it.
Right. And
And
also now I said that about power storytelling.
yeah.
Storytelling is that. So I don't know how many times that I come across, because I advise many startup, established companies, and even at the C level. When you talk about C level, or CEOs, CFOs, like this is a very at the high level on the leadership role that they have in their company. But that doesn't mean they're actually experts in banking and finance career, except if they're CPA or CFO. Sometimes even the CFO, different depending on the level of experiences of the CFO has, whether they actually working on the small company, big company, that's a very difference, right? And so that's why even in the banking, you have small business, you have the commercial banking middle market, then you have a corporate finance, everything, and then you have the investment banking. So every that line of business have a different approach and has a different understanding. So the power of storytelling, I cannot just say this enough. So especially in entrepreneurs and startup out there and the founders, listen, you're gonna be, as a founders, you're gonna have a founder's dilemma. But do know you don't know everything. Like me, I don't know a lot of things. You know what you know, I know what I know.
Mm-hmm.
Simple as that. However, that doesn't stop us from learning from each other.
Mm-hmm.
So the startups is basically that, when I advise them, as typically when they're trying to pitch to raise capital, right? And a lot of times, and it really depends, sometimes the CEO, I mean, not CEO, but in the startup, like a founder, so they always think that they have to know it all and they know it all, everything, right? But they don't understand that you're not in HR because you never work in HR.
Mm-hmm.
You are not in a PR or marketing, because sometimes you are the worst person to represent your company to speak publicly about your
Right.
company.
Right.
Yeah. So for example, like giving you that, when I studied my MBA at the university, in my cohort, there is one person that actually I'm so impressed every single time with her, and this is why she works in these healthcare industry, and she always negotiate with the union, and it's not easy to do negotiation with the union. And what it does is basically is that sometimes when I talk about certain things, she can come out maybe in a one line, say, that's what you say? Exactly. She can capture everything, the essence of what I wanted to convey, and
Mm-hmm.
she can communicate that very clear. So it's talent, right? And telling the stories. Now, going back to the founders, when they pitch, right, they need to actually found the people and the companies that know how to pitch. Of course, the best for founders to represent the company because they are the one who founding the company. But I've seen often founders, when you're not ready, they got nervous in front of the audience. Like maybe they should engage you, Melinda, to speak in flow, so
Yes. Yes.
to
Yes.
get that, learn how to speak, publicly, and because it's not everybody's cup of tea.
Right.
And when they got nervous, they lost a lot
They
of
lost the
train
train
of
of thought.
thought.
Yeah.
Yeah, train of thought. And basically then the investors look like you're not confident. How can we, trust you as a, with our money, things like that. And so the power of storytelling is that we make sure what you present that on their pitch deck is basically that it create a story that resonate to the investors or to the lenders that you're talking to, because it's provide the narrative that for that respective companies and that you're trying to do, right? But for example, sometimes basic stuff that I've seen recently, a founder who present to the investors, he doesn't even look when he speak, doesn't have eye contact at all. He look down all the time, look on the floor. And
Uh-huh.
so I realized that I mean that is the basic stuff. You shouldn't do that because it
Right, right,
shows that it's how tired you are. I don't know how many meetings and pitches that you already done,
right,
but it's like you only got one shot every
right.
single time. That's
Right.
it.
And so I want to clarify, did you say that when you're pitching or when you're telling a story, you want to pick a story that resonates with the audience, resonates with the investor,
Yes, and because
right?
remember
So
those investors, when they want to invest, a lot of those investors have experience in the industry that they wanted to invest.
right. So how do I know if I'm trying to pitch, how do I know that what do you just look online to say, hey, this traditionally this person has invested in
Do
these
your
types
homework, right? So
of your
basically,
homework?
before you pitch,
Yeah,
you get invitation for who are these VCs, for example,
yeah,
who are these like at the angel groups, the angel
right,
investors group.
right.
If you can find your point of contact and do a little bit of research who you are, it's just like when people go for job interviews, right? If they know that who's the interviewer and then what it is, do your homeworks a little bit and then know that. So when you're speaking, so you get ready. And sometimes, I would say a lot of the VCs, the one, the kind one, the kind, very kindness, they actually provide like insight, like, okay, this is what we're looking for.
Yeah. But are you telling them, are you training them to do a story around their background and why they started the company, or what kind of stories are they?
Storytelling is like it's very powerful. For example, as a
Right.
founders, like why they're passionate about their
Why
product.
they're passionate about the
Yeah.
product.
Why is that? How does it come about that they're trying to solve the problem? Is this
Right.
problem is just like one problem, just only applied to them, or this is a problem globally that they
Right.
need to tackle and then can
Right.
help people around the world globally?
Right.
Because a lot of the investors that they're looking at how big like this company can go IPO, right? If the problems and then the solutions that the company is trying to provide is that solutions that are going to tackle or disrupt the market, disrupt the technologies globally, right? Because then that your products can go global. But if the products or the services you actually trying to solve is only one, solve the local problem, may not be the investors that they wanted to invest in your company because they're looking for different things that more company can go global.
Yeah.
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 So passionate is about then what you're driven, why you're driven, right? And then why is that your management team is the right team for you to execute and to execute your company and then get this company off the ground and be successful. And so
Right.
these stories are important and they don't and like for example recently I asked like the founder and he said I asked him, so how do you know your co-founder, because you have you have all of them are three and then
Mm,
these co-founders, one of them is actually from their high school, so they know each other, they're buddies. The
mm,
other co-founder that became, unfortunately, that co-founder, it became a CEO. So my question is that how do you get to know and pick this person as a CEO? When one person that you are in the Bay Area here and one person in the Philippines, how do you get to know each other and how do you select this person as a CEO and why?
right.
So this is like, and because I saw when they're doing this pitching, right? The founders who do the pitching is like uncomfortable and the story
Oh,
that there's not the same of passions that he has for his
yeah.
on the
Oh
co-founder because they know
no.
from high school.
Oh, got it. Got it. Got it. That makes sense.
Right. It
It
doesn't
doesn't, you
transcend.
can see it. You can see the
You can see
passion.
it.
You can totally see it.
Yeah, the comfortable, like, uncomfortable.
Yes, yes. Yeah, I agree. I can see that because I work with a lot of different presenters. And this is really true. Even though you're talking about someone pitching to gain capital from investors, these same concepts apply to whether you're pitching to a stakeholder. If you're an organization and you're a company leader, sometimes you have to pitch your initiative. Like this initiative is going to help if you're thinking about how it can help globally. You're earlier, like the investors want to hear how it's going to help globally. So if you're pitching an initiative, think broader. How is this going to help the company versus maybe your department? right?
Yeah,
Tell a story, a compelling story. If you're only thinking about the department or the like the one area, just think more broadly, and then that will be more compelling, and tell stories on that, and that will be more compelling for your stakeholders.
absolutely. Even
Yeah,
what I do at Hakim Saya as a
yeah,
founder and principal, your
right,
global funding partner, when I look at the project finance, so
right.
particularly that I'm gonna get excited what, for example, what project, okay, it's not just like, oh, I'm doing these XYZ project cost
Yeah,
2 billion US dollar. Sounds big, all that. It doesn't matter to me. And sometimes it's like the project could be only 20 million or 50 million. But what matters to me is looking at what project, what impact they have in the community, how many
right,
jobs are they planning to create, and also what kind of impact that they have to the world.
right.
How are these going to serve them to realize their project become reality? Because I think this is very important, not only like trying to seek out money,
Yeah,
right? And but the project, what is it you've done to the community that you live or the global community that you're going to have this impact? So it's got more excited about that rather
oh,
than
yeah.
I have this cool technology that I'm going to do like renewable energy, whatnot. But what does that mean, right? So
The impact, right? Yeah.
the
And then
impact.
and then when you're speaking is speak it with passion. Don't just look it at the ground and look at the ground the whole time.
Yeah, and this is very
Passion.
sometimes this is basic, but it's happened day in
It's
and
so,
day out.
especially when you're nervous, especially
Yeah.
when you're nervous. Like we
Well,
do.
I get nervous as well, no matter how professionals I am, but but sometimes there are days I lost my train of thought. But
Yeah.
I think it would just come backed up, right? How you're going to like quickly and just like recover from that moment. And then
Yeah.
sometimes we do, like I call it, like I have a senior moment, but I'm not senior yet, but
You can laugh, make a joke about it.
right. And
Have
then
some
just like
joke.
immediately you backed up and then just then you can, okay, right? And so it happens to everyone. It happened to
Yeah.
any entertainer, no matter what and how
Yeah.
professional they
Yeah.
are. Like when they go on stage, they suddenly they forget the lyrics.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Oh
Yeah.
yeah. I get it. Yeah. Oh my goodness. That was really amazing. I think that was a fantastic, so great tips helping us to understand the complexity of financial communication, everywhere from jargon to email to even just regular plain English, how it could be quite nuanced and complicated. But I think you provided some really good tips of how to navigate this, how to master it. I like storytelling and being able to tell compelling stories, say them with passion and go big, like say compelling, think bigger. What is the impact that you're trying to make and tell the story around it?
Absolutely. And I think it was just that for my years is, seeing and seeing, being judging a lot of these, sometimes the competitions, right? Pitch competitions, the demo day that people that, a lot of these accelerators or whatever they
Yeah.
do.
Yeah.
And, I've seen that companies coming from like South Korea, coming from Malaysia, Singapore, all the other different parts of the world when they pitch is very different because the cultural differences and how they are, and the Americans are different.
Right, right,
The
right,
Americans is always like, I would say in general, always come out, but actually that very confidence. Sometimes even like then the American ways is a little bit different. Then I have to digging more like on the facts. So is
right,
that correct?
right,
Like,
right.
but they show that they present themselves a very different. And then sometimes that I've seen another country when they pitch, like they are very shy because of culturally, even though the companies is really good, what they're doing, what
Mhm.
they are building is fantastic. But it's just that the way that they don't, like trying to communicate that they don't know how because they're afraid.
Unfortunate. It's
Yeah, they're
unfortunate.
afraid that being boastful, they're afraid that being egoistic, right?
Right,
To be
right.
seen
No,
and perceived that way.
right, right. Yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting. And it's not true.
Yeah, it is not. So I think it like, cultural differences, I do
Yeah.
have a colleagues that, wrote a book about how to talk to Americans basically. And she's the author and one of the co-author of the how to talk to to Americans and doing business. So her job is basically like letting know people that how to not to piss off other people when you're doing business. Like, like when you have to like elbow bumps and it is
Yes,
not okay
yes,
in certain cultures.
yes,
It's
yes.
very
Oh my
exotic
goodness.
sometimes.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Oh, Murat, that was so fun. That was awesome. How would, if a company, domestic, international company needs some access to capital, how could they find you?
Absolutely. I welcome any opportunity to work in even a small, medium enterprises, whether you are domestics, companies, or whether you are international companies. And please, you can reach out to go to my website, which is at www.hakim, HAKIM, So it's www.hakimsaya.com. Start with that first. Fill out those, inquiry form and send us an email at info@hakimsaya.com. And when you fill out those forms, and then it gives you the options to whether that you're doing international for project financing or invoice financings, or for domestics requests as well. Reach out and call. It's great, but because I'm busy, so maybe the best way is actually to get hold of me is through email. And then when I get comfortable, I would definitely reach out to each individual. I have very swift response, and I am also very quick and say yes or no, whether I can work with you or not.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And we're going to put your website also in the show notes. So
Oh, okay. Thank
I
you
will
so
put that
much,
too.
Melinda.
You're
I just,
welcome.
yeah, I really hope that, your audience and, will benefit at least one or two, what we discussed today on your podcast. And then again, it's a privilege and it's an honor to be part of your journey. I wish you all the best and so successful on your podcast. So, and then you can invite me to come back the next time.
Yes, yes, of course. There's a lot that we can learn even more. I mean, there's just so much to talk about, but thank you so much for sharing. What you gave today was valuable and valuable. I trust they're going to get some nuggets and learn on how to do this effectively.
Yes, and
So,
last but not least, do know for your audience, when I speak, it's come from the place of really care.
yes.
That's the place that I talk about. It's not merely lip services. That is from the place that I know that I'm dearly sincere of when I shared that for decades of experiences and knowledge.
No, and that's why we are buddies. We're colleagues, and you
Yeah.
know my audience. My audience are heart-centered leaders on a mission to make an impact, make a difference. And so thank you, Murat. Thank you, dear listeners, for being here. And I'll see you at the next episode. Take care.
Thank you guys. Thanks, Melinda.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for joining the conversation today. Are you curious on how you measure up with your ability to speak in flow? Come grab my free self-assessment at https://speakinflow.com/assessment. And I'll see you on the other side.